This is Proxy Countdown. Welcome to the big show for the week of January 22nd, 2024, alongside my tag team partner, Matt Moscardi. I'm Damian Rollis. On today's countdown, a semiconductor company finds the courage to invite its second woman into the boardroom. A hard-headed wrestler fills a folding metal board chair at a fighting company. A coalition of labor unions tries to fill a symbolically empty board chair at Starbucks. Vote results at Visa and Costco. And finally, on the big vote, Matt's recommendation on the world's most beloved brand. Stay tuned to find out what that brand is.
Oh, wow. Teaser.
Let's get right to our trade wire and our top stories. First and foremost, TKA Group has appointed two members to its board, a dude named Bradley Keywell that nobody cares about, and a dude named The Rock that everybody not named Bradley Keywell cares about. The Rock also signs a services agreement worth $30 million in equity. New director there at TKO Group, The Rock, Dwayne Johnson.
I love celebrity directors. We have a number of them, like Grant Hill, Shaquille O'Neal, athlete celebrities.
Director turnover at Las Vegas Sands, where Nora Jordan and David Levy and their combined 9% influence are stepping down, while Alain Lee, president of the French Chamber of Commerce and Industry in Hong Kong, is joining the board. Lee is on a bit of a Sin Company board role as he joined the board of French booze company Remy Cointreau in July. McCormick & Company welcomes its third black male director to the board in Terry Thomas, Chief Growth Officer of Flower Foods. For corporate America, this is saying something. 3 black male directors. Microchip Technology is appointing only its second female director, Ellen Barker, the former Chief Information Officer of Texas Instruments. Again, quite odd to see only one woman on the board at such a big company. And lastly, a possible hint at the successor to CEO Brian Cornell at Target. CFO Michael Fidelki is now the company's COO after having served as CFO since 2019. That's fresh off our trade wire. Let's go to our proxy cage matches. A quick update on the proxy cage match at Disney, where Blackwells has been begging shareholders to take its nominated directors seriously, and where Trian has announced that it wants Disney to be as good as Netflix. Trian, also worth pointing out, Trian, this is how the filing process for these proxy cage matches work. The activists are constantly filing with the SEC. As an example, Trian dedicated an entire SEC filing with a single tweet from Jim Cramer over there at CNBC Mad Money. And the quote is, "I think the stock of Disney is now going up in large part because of the heat Peltz is generating." That was the entire filing with the SEC, a tweet from Jim Cramer. At Starbucks, the Strategic Organizing Center has finally announced the 3 directors it is targeting in its attempt to convince shareholders to elect 3 labor-friendly nominees to the board, and they are Compensation Committee Chair and flat white drinking Rich Allison, Audit Committee Chair and brown sugar oat milk latte fan Andy Campion, and Nominating Committee Chair and caramel macchiato sipping Jorgen Vig Nudestorp. So the SOC is targeting all 3 of the chairs of the committees over there at Starbucks for its 3 directors that we mentioned before: labor lawyer Wilma Liebman, seasoned corporate director and pensions expert Joshua Gottbaum, and former senior White House official Maria Echaveste.
Look, I'm calling this one now. It's going to be a split vote, mostly because Nudestorp already we do an adjusted vote that adjusts out BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street, who typically vote with management. And Newstorp already got an adjusted for vote of 84%, the worst on the board last year. So this is a rare vote against a nom chair for anything other than diversity issues. Typically, you see ISS has a policy that says vote against the nom chair if the board's not diverse. That's not the case here. The board is very diverse. So either investors don't like Laxman becoming the CEO, or they don't like the other board members, or they just don't like Newstorp. But either way, it could be a win for SOC. But SOC missed a trick. The worst performing director on the board is actually Beth Ford. She's on both the comp and audit committees. She bats 385 for earnings and 387 for TSR, both below average. And outside of Hobson is the most connected director on the board. Instead of choosing three white dudes and looking like you're woke, target Newstorp, Campion, and Beth Ford. Keep Rich Allison in there, who bats a fantastic 731 earnings and overall is a pretty average director. And I would have gone for the other three, but I'm expecting a split vote here.
I will say that these three directors represent the least amount of influence, 3%, 6%, and 6% respectively. So it might be an inspired choice by the SOC, as they are merely there to rubber stamp decisions from the board's powerful duopoly and CEO Laxman Narasimhan and Chair Melody Hobson. So maybe that's maybe they have access to free flow data and they're targeting the three least powerful directors at
Smart.
Starbucks.
It's smart of you, SOC. Use our data.
And lastly, in a different kind of proxy cage match where the wealthy corporation tries to sidestep shareholders entirely, ExxonMobil is trying to avoid a proxy battle by suing activist investors Arjuna Capital and the shareholder advocacy group Follow This to kill a proposed shareholder resolution that calls on Exxon to set more aggressive emissions cutting targets. The case, filed in a Texas federal district court, is an unusual effort to deter a shareholder campaign rather than appealing to the SEC on a given resolution.
Look, I actually think in the last three, I looked at the data. In the last three votes, Arjuna has filed three shareholder proposals that got majority votes in the last 3 years. The one at Lowe's for race gender pay gaps, one at Microsoft for sexual harassment policies, and Kroger for race gender pay gaps. 16 of their other 65 proposals since 2014 at Fortune 100 companies got more than 25% approval. This isn't some investor who's just throwing out whatever with some social agenda. Their average overall support is 18% approval, which, as shareholder proposals go, is really high, is a strong number. So they're not asking for something that shareholders don't want. It's not a social activist. This is a shareholder that tends to represent other shareholder demands in their shareholder proposals. The fact that Exxon is going against them and suing them is really just the anti-woke wind at their back, thinking they can pick and choose the investors and shareholder proposals that they want to deal with or the ones that they don't. But the reality here is Arjuna has been a good shareholder proposal filer. They've been a representative of shareholders. This is all kabuki theater.
In its lawsuit, Exxon is alleging a, quote, extreme agenda that looks to force ExxonMobil to change the nature of its ordinary business or to go out of business entirely.
This is a bananas lawsuit from them, and it's designed to hurt them so that they have to fight it. That's all it's designed to do. It's not designed with the interest of shareholders.
Moving over to our vote results table, let's start with a small cap company, Aware, where shareholders were asked to vote on an option exchange program, which essentially gives executives another chance to make money off underwater options. The proposal passed with 65% of the vote, but it is the nature of the vote that is most telling. The total number of yes votes was just over 10,214,000, while the total number of votes held by insiders and top owners, including CEO Bob Eckel and Director John Stafford, came to just over 10,200,000. So it is just the votes, the yes votes were just the people it's going to benefit most, the executives and top owners.
Yeah, if you think your votes don't count, that's 14,000 shares difference from being a 0% shareholder approval. Like, why do we give, I know we like the dual class founder fetish, But when the insiders control it, this is what you get. You're along for their ride.
At large cap companies, the vote results came in at two meetings that we covered here in our big vote. First at Costco, where average director support was 96%. Also, only 6% rejected say on pay, and 98% said no to the anti-woke shareholder proposal. Let's get right to Matt's picks. I don't know if they really matter, Matt, but you said vote against Hamilton James, vote against Craig Jelinek, vote for say on pay, vote against the anti-woke shareholder proposal. But, I think in this case, Matt, shareholders were not listening to your advice.
I'm shocked. They should have listened to some of it, but I'm shocked that it's hard for me to believe they didn't.
I will say that the anti-ESG company started by former presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy, called Strive Asset Management, was actually more aggressive than you, Matt. They said to vote against 7 of the 11 directors at Costco.
I have nothing to say about Strive except that we are aligned in voting against everything.
Vote results are also in at Visa, another company we cover here in the big vote. Again, all directors received between 97% and 99.88% of votes for. That's about it. Matt, again, your picks, you voted against 4 directors, but shareholders were very much in favor of all directors at Visa.
Look, here's what I would say. Go back to the proxy countdowns where we give the recommendations at Costco and Visa and listen to our reasoning. And maybe you'll vote differently next time because there's good reasons to vote against these directors.
Before we get to the big vote, I will say there are also at large cap companies, the vote results came in for DR Horton, Intuit, and Micron Technology. But again, there's not much to see here. Out of all 3 companies, only 2 directors even received votes above 10% against, but that number was right around 10%, so not a significant vote, at least that the directors will not be leaving anytime soon. That's it. That's the vote results table. It is now time for the big vote, where we get to hear Matt weigh in on the world's most famous brand, most beloved brand, Apple. Is there a more beloved brand than Apple?
I don't think there is, and I don't think there's a more discussed technology company other than maybe Google. It's neck and neck.
Apple's annual meeting is coming up at the end of February, on February 28th, 2024. Before I hand it over to Matt, who has a lot to say about this board, I will give you some general observations. Overall, the board, it's an average board. They're hitting 525, neither great, but not bad. Of note, last year, 2 directors ostensibly have been asked to step down because of a retirement age policy on the board. That's Al Gore, former Vice President Al Gore, and James Bell. They both hit the retirement age of 75, and they stepped down, which is, a positive thing. But at the same time, Ron Sugar, who is the audit committee chair, who is also turning 75, is staying on the board because Apple has waived the retirement age policy to his benefit. There's really no rhyme or reason as to why. Other than that, I wanted to point out that it's a very interesting board in the sense that in the post-Steve Jobs environment that is Apple, the Apple board very much is a 3-headed post-Jobs leadership team. It's not what you think it is. It's not. Tim Cook does not control all the power here because he's a CEO. In fact, our data shows that there are 3 directors who basically have equal power, and that is CEO Tim Cook, Chair Art Levinson, who's been on the board since the year 2000, and a shareholder and a nomination committee chair, Susan Wagner. She is the co-founder of BlackRock, and BlackRock owns 7% of Apple. So it's really those 3 directors that our data finds controls this board. So with that, Matt, I know you have a lot to say. I'm going to hand off. What are your observations, recommendations? How do we handle the board at Apple?
So it's worth going through where we started, and we had a long discussion in pre-production about this, because how do you assess a company that since Tim Cook took over, Apple has returned more than 1,400% on its stock since Tim Cook took over, which is 4 or 5 times the S&P 500 in the same time. This is a company that has, by all investor accounts, had massive returns. It's one of the largest companies in the world.
And it's consistent year over year. In fact, this year, Apple's total shareholder return relative to other companies in the S&P 500 was at the 98th percentile for that performance period.
Every single year. But here's what happens when you actually dig into these numbers. And I'm going to say something blasphemous for Apple right now. But if we're honest, the top 5 selling products under Tim Cook are the iPhone, launched and designed by Steve Jobs. The iPad, launched and designed by Steve Jobs. The App Store, launched and designed by Steve Jobs. The Apple Watch, which was launched under Tim Cook, but R&D'd under Steve Jobs. He reportedly was into wearables, and he started designing the Apple Watch before it became a thing under Tim Cook. The AirPods, which by all accounts were launched by Tim Cook. So Tim Cook, his background is an ops guy with a quiet demeanor.
Ops and sales, yeah.
He's brought into the CEO role after a professional board was surrounded Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs, who was ousted in the 90s, brought back after they bought Next, made CEO again. Everybody knows Steve Jobs was a visionary. He was mercurial, hard to work with. And they surrounded him with professional board members who would, quote unquote, control him. And what we see from a cultural or institutional standpoint is a board that looks exactly the same as the one that would control the CEO, but effectively now they're selling what the visionary CEO had built 10 or 15 years later, and that is the basis for how they make their money today.
Yeah, it seems like a company that built a big, beautiful cruise ship under Steve Jobs, and then when Steve passed away at a very young age, he would only be 68 today. The goal of the company was to push the ship out into the waters and to have it very calmly sail it. Right.
And sail it. And that's exactly what we've got up until the launch of the Apple Vision Pro, which is the first fully Tim Cook piece of hardware that Apple's coming out with. But the board surrounding Tim Cook is not a board that was designed to plan for 10 years from now. They are still managing from 15 years ago. Okay, so that is your backdrop. And I know it's blasphemous to say this about a company that has returned exponential amounts of shareholder capital. Like if you're a shareholder in Apple, you love it. It's really hard. You'd be listening to this and saying, like, why do I care about anything that you're saying?
If you're a long-term holder.
I've made so much money on this company.
Yeah, maybe not if you're buying in today, but as a long-term holder, absolutely.
But let's think about if you're holding this company for any more years going forward, right? Like if you're buying it today or you're holding it going forward. This board is the 3rd most powerful board network of U.S. large cap companies. It is one of the most connected, juiced board members, the professional board members, not just in the U.S. too, in the world. 78% of the board are actually connected to each other inside of 2 degrees. So friends or friends of friends. They are hugely insular.
In fact, let me add that the only new board member this year is Wanda Austin. She's actually 69 years old. She's only 6 years shy of that retirement age if they choose to honor it. She's 69. She's the former CEO of the Aerospace Corporation. A very impressive woman by all accounts, very impressive person by all accounts. But I will say this, to your point, Matt, she sits on the boards of Amgen and Chevron. Ron Sugar, the man who's been there since 2010, who they waived the retirement age policy for, the audit committee chair. He also sits on the board of Amgen, and he also sat on the board of Chevron. It's almost like the same person.
Basically, that's what we're doing. This is a very Boeing-like board in as much as they're recycling a lot of the same people from the same places that they know. It is an investor-friendly board, a CEO-friendly board. Every director at this board, on their other boards, not just at Apple, they tend to pay out big dividends, they take out less debt, and they pay tons of money to the CEO. They love paying their CEOs. They're in some of the highest CEO payers in the world. They are very customer unfriendly. In fact, Apple's board as a team ranks in the top 20 for large cap director teams for overseeing controversies. Those controversies range from fraud, consumer, selling malpractice, consumer protection issues, union quashing, environmental issues. They've overseen it all on their other boards, not just at Apple. And they are definitely a regulator or government concerned board. These are directors that have direct experience working with the government, including at least one, Andrea Jung, who is one of who sat on boards where they do a lot of lobbying. The executives give a lot to Democrats. 85% of their donations in the last 3 election cycles were Democratic for Democratic nominees, and those are the executive teams. But you also have Ron Sugar on the board, who was from a military contractor, effectively, at Northrop Grumman for a long time. These are very savvy directors. Mm-hmm. And you know what I didn't say they have? Designers, engineers. 3 of the 10 directors have any engineering experience, and not one of them is Tim Cook. Right, like Tim Cook actually was an ops guy in his background. He has an engineering degree from years ago, but he's spent his entire career in ops and supply chain issues. That leaves you with Ron Sugar, who got an engineering degree in 1968, and Art Levinson, who's a biotech guy. So the guy they waived the age restriction for to keep him around, and the guy who's been there for 23 years. Effectively, we are dealing with designers and engineers of the past to lead us into the future, and they still represent a vast minority of this board.
I will say it's a highly unusual situation because, it's a succession that happened because of a sudden death, and it was a succession that happened to take over for the world's most famous, to your point, engineer, designer, the man who created the brand, created the customer loyalty, created the design, like everything that we know and love about Apple was all in the hands of one person who died at a very young age. So it is an unusual situation.
And I will say this too, because when you look at the skills matrix that Apple publishes, now we talk about skills matrices on our Business Pants show the other day, but the skills matrix that these companies put out, they put it out voluntarily.
Yeah, it's unregulated.
Totally unregulated. They get to choose the skills they include.
And say what they want to say.
Say whatever they want to say. So what I did, because I said, it looks like almost everyone on this board has tech experience, right? But what I did was I went through every board member and all the other skills matrices of boards that they're on. So, for instance, we know that Andrea Jung also sits on the Unilever board and the Wayfair board, right? Now, on the Apple board, she is tagged as a financial expert with no tech expertise and no government expertise. But on the Unilever board, she's tagged as no financial expertise, but she has tech expertise and geopolitical expertise. The exact opposite between the two boards. Mm-hmm. That suggested to me that looking through the skills matrix, if you're looking to see, does my board skills actually position me for the future, for 10 years from now, you can't use the skills matrix. Because you see that Wanda Austin, the incoming director, who you said already has an existing relationship with Ron Sugar and the other board members, she's tagged already on Apple as being a financial expert, but on Amgen, she's not. She's tagged at Chevron as being an international affairs expert, but at Amgen, she has no international affairs expertise. She's a financial expert at Virgin Galactic and named as a public CEO at Virgin Galactic. She's never been a public CEO. In fact, she was the CEO of a company that was privately held.
The Aerospace Corporation, yes.
So we're not talking about consistency in the skills matrices that can lead you to a place where you think that they're going to bring you into the future. In fact, there's an argument to be made that the skills matrices are relatively fraudulent. They're make-believe, and there's no regulation that says they have to say something, but they're effectively selling these directors as having skills they may not have. So the only thing you can rely on is, what did they actually do? Who are these people actually? And do they know each other? So this gets me to this theory of change on the Apple board.
Okay.
What you may want if you are investing for 10 years from now, not for now. I want a less insular board. You can get the same performance of these board members with less connected directors. We've seen it before. You can see it here. And we want directors that are designed for the future. We're talking about a future in which AI is pervasive and it's going to be in the purview of the executives. Those executives will need guardrails, and those guardrails should come from the board members. You need them to have future tech experience or be building or involved with future tech. Treat this hardware company more like other hardware and tech companies and put in people who understand the tech. So my recommendations for this board is a staggered set of voting out, because clearly Apple, if they're willing to waive their retirement restriction for Ron Sugar, it means that they are not willing to let go of the past, right? The recommendations start with vote out Ron Sugar.
Which is not an aggressive move, considering that the new director, Wanda Austin, again, is basically a carbon copy of Ron Sugar.
She has more recent engineering experience, more recent tech experience, and she has all the same connections. They sit on the same boards. So she's got better engineering bona fides and the same connections. What do you need Ron Sugar for?
And again,
you don't need him to groom her. In fact, she is a well-accomplished director.
And again, from a corporate governance perspective, if you're going to have a retirement age policy and 2 directors are stepping down because of that policy, you probably should stick to the policy and ask Ron Sugar to move on.
I think that's correct. You consistent with the policy. And second, in this cycle, I think you vote out Sue Wagner. Sue Wagner is the chair of the nominating committee, and she is a shareholder by proxy through her association with BlackRock. We don't need that proxy. BlackRock already has plenty of influence on this board. We don't need Sue Wagner to represent either BlackRock or to be the head of the nominating committee and keep up the same cycle of insular directors rotating in and out. And that's the first year. I think by next year, by 2025, you let Art Levinson retire.
Well, he will be 75 in less than 2 years.
Which means he's going to be up against that age. He's been there for 23 years. If he won't retire, then you have to vote him out. It's time to move on. Steve Jobs has now been gone for 12 years, 13 years. It's time now to move on and move into the future.
Go ahead. I was going to say what's hopeful about this is if you remove those 3 directors in the next couple of years, you've opened up 37, you've opened up roughly 45% of board influence.
That's
which
right.
Can only be a good thing for a long-term view here, right, at Apple?
Right. And I think you need to bring in design or tech-oriented people. You want to replace some of that void with somebody, I'm thinking of the deposed board members from OpenAI, right? What if you were to put one of those women on this board, right? Those are people who are highly accomplished and proven their independence, right? Like proven their ability to follow the mandate of the board. And the mandate of Apple's board is not going to be the same as OpenAI. It's going to be more about profit maximization, and it's a company that sells hardware. It's not a nonprofit. It's not mission driven, as was written at OpenAI. But imagine having someone like that who understands the future and the guardrails required for it.
Yeah, and again, I will say the opportunity is very real here because, again, these 3 directors represent 47% of influence. So you could be constructing half of your board that is future-facing, that could have expertise in things like AI, engineering, design, technology. It's an opportunity for shareholders.
And they're also the next board, in the next 3 to 5 years, we're seriously going to be talking about Tim Cook's succession plan. How long is Tim Cook going to be around? We do not need an ops person anymore to run Apple unless you just want it to sail on its historical technology. We want it to sail into the future, right?
Yeah.
But that means you need a board who's designed not to contain the CEO and sail the Carnival Cruise Line to future diarrhea. We need them to build something new. What's the next generation of stuff?
Yeah, nobody likes future diarrhea. Why don't we wrap up your choices on the board and we can move on to the other proposals at Apple? Wrap up your
My final choice here is for in 2025, you'd remove Andrea Jung as well, and you'd add more engineering. And then 2026, you flip the rest. rest. But I think overall
This
summary
year.
here is this year you focus on Ron Sugar. He's
Right.
had a long run, enough influence, and vote out Sue Wagner. Change the construction of the nom committee.
And again, I will say not an aggressive choice because Ron Sugar has reached the retirement age.
Just comply
according
with
to their policy. Moving on to Say on Pay, I will say that 12% of shareholders voted against Say on Pay last year, considerably more than they were voting against directors. And I'm guessing part of the issue here is Tim Cook makes a lot of money at Apple. He's made $261 million over the last 3 years. But again, total shareholder return relative to the S&P 500 is very strong. So I don't know if you want to weigh in here, Say on Pay.
Look, I think you vote for in this case. I know that I think it's hard to vote against and hard to justify given their performance. But I do think that you're not voting for Tim Cook's performance. You're voting for Tim Cook guiding Steve Jobs' performance to this point. I mean, effectively, Tim Cook is largely getting a vote for being an even keel and doing an excellent job of keeping Apple in the direction Steve Jobs put it in.
Shareholder proposals, and then we can wrap up the show for the week of January 22nd. There are 5 shareholder proposals at Apple this year. 3 of them are anti-woke. We'll start with the National Center for Public Policy Research, which seems to now have a proposal at every S&P 500 company. They have a proposal asking Apple to issue a public report detailing the potential risks associated with omitting viewpoint and ideology from its written equal employment opportunity policy. We see this one a lot.
I just love that they're now straight cribbing from what they consider to be woke proposals. They said, quote, companies with inclusive policies are better able to recruit the most talented employees from a broad labor pool, resolve complaints internally, and avoid costly litigation or reputational damage. And they, moreover, inclusive policies contribute to more efficient human capital management. Like this is language that the ESG community has been saying for a decade. And I love that they're using DEI language for ideological, anti-DEI ideological inclusion, except that they missed the whole point of DEI isn't a choice. Your sexual orientation, your gender orientation or fluidity, race, ethnicity, these are born attributes. Liking Ronald Reagan is a choice. Liking pizza is a choice. I'm conservative on how much milk I drink and liberal how much pizza I consume. So what do I report? What's the report here? These are stupid. You vote against.
So it's a no on number 4. Proposal number 5, another anti-woke proposal from the American Family Association, an organization that not only opposes LGBT rights, but they also oppose LGBT expression. That's pretty hardcore there.
It is, but for this proposal,
yes, they are asking for a report.
Different.
They're asking for a report on ensuring the respect for civil liberties. And one of the issues that they raised was that they're concerned about Apple's threat to remove Twitter, owned by Elon Musk, from its App Store, a seemingly political swipe.
Which, look, I don't. Their justification I find to be relatively horrid. But what they're actually asking for is a report detailing how apps get chosen and how app disputes with governments are resolved. I'm not sure that's a bad thing.
Sure.
They actually provide an app transparency report about the number of apps that get taken down and some of the reasons, like what brings them down. But they don't talk about how they actually resolve disputes with governments or resolve disputes with those like the people who start the apps. I'm curious what this report looks like. Why not? Vote for it. Give them a win.
Proposal number 6, we talked about Arjuna Capital already. They're being sued by Exxon Mobil. They have a proposal, racial and gender pay gaps. They want to report. They basically want more details and better disclosure, I think, in a nutshell.
Yeah, I think this is a vote for. And Apple's complaint here, or suggestion for vote against, is we already produce these numbers. Arjuna's saying you produce this number, but we asked for that number. It's basically an unadjusted number. They say take the number that you gave us and just back it up to the unadjusted number. That's the real number. You're obscuring the real number. It's a vote for. I don't know why Apple would even fight this. Just put it in the report.
Well,
take 5 seconds.
And for a little bit of history here, this shareholder proposal is already popular with shareholders. Last year, the same proposal got 35% in support. That's a significant number. Proposal number 7, a report on the use of AI. This one comes from the AFL-CIO. They say they're asking for a transparency report on the company's use of AI in its business operations and disclose any ethical guidelines that the company's adopted regarding the company's use of AI, blah, blah, blah. Mostly, I think, as it relates to labor, two of the issues that they point out, the use of AI in human resources decisions may raise concerns about discrimination or bias, and the use of AI to automate jobs may result in mass layoffs. So that's proposal number 7 coming from the AFL-CIO.
You know, the justifications here are also relatively meaningless to me. Like what Apple said in response was this was too broad an ask, and it would make us compromise our IP in some way or our strategic plans. That to me seems like BS. You can report on how AI is figuring into your future without disclosing this. And we are all at a place where we're talking about how AI could destroy humanity. Apple just produced the report. I don't understand why that's that hard. It's not a ridiculous ask. Vote for.
And finally, proposal number 8, another anti-woke proponent, the National Legal and Policy Center, is asking for a congruency report on privacy and human rights. This one is very similar to number 5, and we've seen this proposal before too.
Well, this one is similar in as much as they make it sound similar, but different in as much as the ask here is actually they're upset because Apple didn't. When the Ukraine invasion happened by Russia, Apple pulled out of sales in Russia. And they're upset because it lost the company an estimated $1.14 billion in sales from Russian customers. So what they're upset about is that tech wasn't sold to Russia. That's what we're upset about. Meanwhile, total revenue for Apple was $383 billion. So they're upset at less than 0.5% of total sales. This is dumb. Vote against it. This is a stupid anti-woke proposal.
To wrap up the big vote on Apple, Matt is saying vote against Ron Sugar, vote against Sue Wagner. That's a yes on Say on Pay. And then it's a vote no on proposal number 4. Shareholder proposal number 4, vote yes on proposal number 5. Vote yes on 6. Vote on AI. Vote
yes. You vote
yes on number
AI
7
report.
and no on number 8.
And no on number 8.
Whew, that's a lot. Apple, their vote coming up February 28th, 2024. That's the proxy countdown for the week of January 22nd, 2024. Join us next week when we jump back into the alternative democracy pool, forever on the lookout for shareholder sharks, floating band-aids, and wayward directors.